Hi, this video is for TJC, Chapter 7, which focuses on interpersonal communication. Here's a list of some of the topics that we're going to talk about in this chapter. First of all, what is interpersonal communication? What motivates us to initiate our relationships? How do we maintain our relationships? And finally, we're going to talk about the role that self-disclosure plays in relationships. So let's start off with the definition of interpersonal communication. And according to your textbook, it says that interpersonal communication occurs simultaneously with another person in an attempt to mutually influence each other, usually for the purpose of managing relationships. Now you'll want to pay close attention to the key words that I've underlined in this definition. First of all, interpersonal communication occurs simultaneously. So think about your conversations that you've had with a best friend. That communication goes back and forth. I say something, they say something. It's simultaneous. Also, interpersonal communication occurs to mutually influence individuals. So my communication is going to influence my best friend. Their communication is going to influence me. We're also valuing each other's opinions. Also, interpersonal communication occurs for the purpose of managing relationships. And if you think about the reasons that you communicate with your best friends, usually you're communicating to keep that relationship going. You're filling them in on what's going on in your life. They're filling you in on what's going on in their life. And you're managing that relationship along the way. Now, interpersonal communication is different than impersonal communication. With impersonal communication, we don't go beyond roles. What that means is that we have typical roles in society. For example, think about going out to lunch. So you go to a restaurant, you sit down, the server comes over, asks for your order, you order a Coke. In that situation, you're not going beyond the roles of the customer and the server. You're not getting that on an interpersonal communication level. So keep in mind that impersonal communication does not go beyond those initial roles. The next part of the text talks about initiating relationships. And the first part of this initiating relationships material really focuses on interpersonal attraction, which is why we like whom we like. And your book talks about 4 specific reasons that people are interpersonally attracted to each other. The first one is similarity. Now, think about birds of a feather flock together. Lots of times we are initially attracted to somebody based on similar interests, whether this be a friendship starting out or a romantic relationship starting out. Sometimes when you have things in common with somebody else, it's really easy to strike up that conversation and get that interpersonal communication going. Second is physical and sexual attraction. These are also 2 concepts that play into why we initiate relationships with individuals. Also, proximity. If you remember from the nonverbal chapter, proximity is the study of space. So your book says that when we work in close proximity with another person, or if we're around this person often, lots of times we initiate relationships with that person. And then complementarity. Now, this is a concept that tends to be a little bit confusing, but once you wrap your mind around it, it really will make sense. So complementarity says that we start relationships with people based on their ability to complement us. So for example, let's say that I'm not very good at planning, but I meet someone and he is a very good planner. He always has things in line, always in order. In that sense, maybe we make a good couple because we complement each other. So he makes up in the areas that I lack. So that is complementarity. The next part of the initiating relationships information talks about our 3 basic interpersonal needs. And according to your textbook, the first one is inclusion. So inclusion is the need to involve others in one's activities and also to be involved in the activities of other people. We all know that one person that has to be involved in every gathering, every social event, and if you don't invite them, their feelings get hurt, they're sad. So we all have different levels of inclusion. Some people have very high inclusion needs, some people have very low inclusion needs. Think about what your inclusion needs are. The second basic interpersonal need that people have is the need to control. So control is the need to make decisions or the level of willingness to accept others' decision making. So how much do you have to be in control of what you're going to do? Let's say you're working with a group. How much do you have to be in control of that group? And how much are you okay with other people making decisions as well? And the third one is affection. And this is the need to be loved and accepted by others, or the willingness to give love and acceptance to other people. Some of us have very high affection needs. We're very affectionate, very touchy-feely, so to speak. You always have to be hugging your significant other or showing affection in some way or form. Now, let's think about our own interpersonal relationships for a minute, just to kind of get a better idea of where we fall in these three basic interpersonal needs. Here's a scale for you. So it says up here, what motivates you in your relationships? And also think about what motivates your relational partner. So are you very high in control? Where would you fall on the spectrum? Low in control? Are you very high in inclusion? And also affection. Something to think about there. Also, when we think about initiating relationships, your book talks about how do we communicate attraction. Now, you don't always communicate attraction just by speaking. Sometimes this happens non-verbally as well, and the term that's associated with communicating attraction is immediacy. And you may also remember this from the nonverbal chapters, and you're going to see the term immediacy come up again in the presentation chapters where it talks about being immediate with your audience. But in this sense, how are we immediate in interpersonal situations? And here's the way that we do that. If you look at this picture over here, you see the girl, she's gazing into the guy's eyes. So nonverbal cues, and specifically these nonverbal cues communicate feelings of liking, pleasure, and closeness. So you might sit closer to the person, you might lean in towards that person, make eye contact, show them in some way nonverbally that you're interested, that you like them. So that is nonverbal immediacy. Moving forward here, how do we get that first conversation going? So you're being nonverbally immediate, you are thinking about talking to that person to try to find out more information about them. Well, here's some ways that you can do that. And your book talks about uncertainty reduction theory, or URT. And there's three specific strategies that people use to reduce their uncertainty or find out more information about a person. Here's the first strategy. This is a passive strategy. And with the passive strategy, we reduce uncertainty through observation. So there's no communication going on. You're just watching. You're just observing this person, thinking about what they're doing. The second strategy is an active strategy. And with the active strategy, we reduce our uncertainty through a third party. So for example, let's say that there's a classroom full of students and Johnny is interested in Susie. He's watching her through the passive strategy. He's observing. He says, she looks like somebody I would really want to get to know. But he doesn't know if she's in a relationship or not. So he asks one of her friends, says, hey, is Susie in a relationship? That's asking a third party. That's an active strategy. He's not going directly to the source and asking Susie if she's in a relationship. He's asking a third party. So that's an active way that we gather information. And the final strategy is the interactive strategy. And this is communicating directly with the source. Now, if Johnny would have gone directly over to Susie and said, hi, I'm Johnny, are you in a relationship? Which, how awkward is that, right? But if that happens, that would be an example of an interactive strategy, where Johnny is communicating directly with the source and interacting. So there are some key words here, and when you get to the exam, think about, okay, third party, that's active strategy. Communicating directly, that's interactive strategy. So pick up on some of the key words here, maybe jot those down, and keep those in mind when you're taking that assessment. Now, this next part of the chapter is going to talk about self-disclosure. And what is self-disclosure? Here's the definition. It's pretty short and sweet. Revealing yourself to other people. We self-disclose or we share information, and when we do that, we're revealing information about ourselves. Here are some of the properties of self-disclosure. The first one is reciprocity. And this is sharing similar types of information. So, for example, think about the first time you meet someone. You might say, hi, I'm Lori, I'm from Texas. And then you expect that person to also share that same level of information. Hi, I'm Alan, I'm from Florida. So you also share similar types of information. If you share deeper types of information, sometimes you expect people to share that same type of deeper information with you. The second one is appropriateness. And we all have seen instances, maybe it's on a TV show, maybe it's in real life, maybe you know someone who has shared information, maybe that too much too soon, that's not appropriate. Now, we know that this varies across cultures, but think about the appropriate level of self-disclosure. When is a good time to start talking about more topics? When is a good time to start talking about deeper levels of information with different individuals? So reciprocity, appropriateness, and also risk. Risk is the third property of self-disclosure. There's always that potential for rejection, and we know that sharing information with other people can be risky. Once you share information with another person, it becomes their information to either keep or share, and sometimes you trust people with information and you expect them to keep that information. So risk is also associated with self-disclosure. Now, there are also two models of self-disclosure that are talked about in the textbook, and the first one is a theory of social penetration. This was developed by Altman and Taylor. And in general, this theory suggests that both the breadth and depth, and if you're writing this down, or you might want to underline breadth and depth, of information shared with another person increases as the relationship develops. And if you see here on the picture, this is what the self-disclosure social penetration model looks like. Now, the way that I think about this, and maybe this will help you remember this theory, but I like to think about it as an onion. So you have the outer layers, and these are these really superficial topics. So let's think about meeting someone for the first time. You're thinking about where are you from, what do you do? If you're in school, you might say, hi, I'm so-and-so, where are you from, what's your major? So these are the superficial topics. And as you start peeling back the layers and getting to know this person a little bit more, then you start talking about, okay, let's talk about your maybe political views on something, your religion, your family, money, work. If you start peeling back the layers and you get to that core is where you find that interpersonal communication. So think about this in terms of that peeling back the layers. But the key words here, as I indicated a minute ago, is that breadth and depth. So the breadth is the number of topics that you're talking about, and depth is how deep you go into talking about them. How much are you sharing? That's the theory of social penetration. The second model of self-disclosure that your book talks about is a Johari window. And generally, this theory explains how self-disclosure varies from relationship to relationship. And it also reflects three different elements. So first of all, this theory talks about the stages of relational development, or incorporates the stages of relational development, the degree of self-awareness, and also it takes into consideration other people's perceptions. So if you see here, this is the Johari window, and you have 4 different quadrants. You'll definitely want to go back to the e-text and read more about these quadrants, but I'm going to give you a brief overview of each one. So the first quadrant that you see here, the yellow quadrant, is the open quadrant. And if you look at the labels on the top and to the left, this lets you know what goes on in each one of these quadrants. So for the open quadrant, this is information that is known to yourself and known to others. Information that you know about yourself and that you're openly sharing with other people. If you look over or down to the hidden column, which is this darker blue column below, this is information that is known to yourself, so you know the information, but it's unknown to other people. But you're not sharing that information quite yet. This might be in a newer relationship, or sometimes this happens in established relationships where you might know something, but you're not just willing to share it with the other person just yet. The blind quadrant in the top right, this is information that is unknown to the self, but it's known to other people. So think about this in terms of sometimes people know things about ourselves that we don't really recognize right away. Maybe you're in a relationship and it's not the best relationship, but you don't realize it, but your friends do. So this is, this is information that's not really known to yourself, or maybe you haven't admitted it yet, but other people do know. So you're kind of blind in that situation, blind to the information. And then the bottom quadrant here is an unknown quadrant. This is information that is unknown to the self and unknown to other people. So with the unknown quadrant, think about, this is just stuff you don't know yet. As we grow, as we go through different experiences, we learn more about ourselves. So this is that information that we don't know quite yet, but eventually we will. And as we go through different relationships, sometimes we learn more about ourselves as well. So that's the unknown quadrant. Okay, so this covers the material in Chapter 7. I encourage you to go back through and read some more of the examples in Chapter 7, but I want to go ahead and do a few practice questions. So think about the information that we just covered, go through e-text if you need to, and we're going to do a few practice questions. Now keep in mind, most of these are scenario-based, they're applied questions because the types of questions on the exam will also be very applied. So here's the first one. According to the definition given in your book, Which of the following situations would be classified as interpersonal communication? Is it A, the usher at the theater looks at your tickets and then points to the center aisle? B, you and your roommate are discussing a movie that you just watched? C, you call the weather line to offer out the forecast? Or D, you present your project to your history class? Okay, hopefully this is an easy one. And the answer to this, you see here at the bottom, is B. You and your roommate are discussing a movie that you just watched. Here's the next question. When Monica and Daisy were eating at a local restaurant and Monica waved her hand in the air to call the food server to their table, she was engaging in, is it A, interpersonal communication, B, mediated communication, C, server communication, or D, impersonal communication? And the answer to this is D, impersonal communication. Another practice question. Alan and Bobby have been best friends since grade school. They both deeply value one another's opinions, and they both play an important role in one another's lives. This example best illustrates what aspect of interpersonal communication. Think back to that definition here. Is it A, quality, B, simultaneous communication, C, mutual influence, or D, helps to manage relationships? Here's the answer to this one, which is C, mutual influence. Next question. Melissa is frustrated in her relationship with John because he always decides where they're going to eat, what movie they will watch, and whose car they will take when they go out on a date. This example illustrates that John has high blank needs. Is it inclusion needs, affection needs, security needs, or control needs? And the answer to this is D, control needs. Next question. Brian is always having dinner parties at his home. He invites all of his friends and work associates to his home. Brian probably has a high need to what? Is it include others? B, be affectionate towards others? C, control others? Or D, make people feel secure? And the answer to this one is A, include others. Think about those 3 interpersonal needs. Next question. Kristen and Mark were attracted to one another, although they did not appear to their friends to go together. Kristen was not very good with money, but Mark kept his checkbook in immaculate order and always knew how much money they had available to spend. These two found an attraction based on A, self-disclosure, B, proximity, C, complementarity, or D, compatibility. And the answer to this one is C, complementarity. Next question. Altman and Taylor's model of social penetration illustrates what? Is it how people reduce uncertainty about each other in the early stages of a relationship? How much and what kind of information we reveal in various stages of a relationship? How people make use of verbal and nonverbal communication to form impressions of the other? Or how men and women communicate differently in friendship relationships? And this is the onion model. The answer to this is B, how much and what kind. Think about the breadth and depth of the information there. Next question. The Johari window is a model that demonstrates that self-disclosure, A, stays relatively consistent for most people in most relationships, B, changes from relationship to relationship but stays the same for the duration of that relationship, is it C, both A and B, or D, differs from person to person for each relationship and changes during the stages of the relationship? And the answer to this is D. Great job on answering the questions. Here's a recap of what we talked about in this video. First of all, we talked a little bit about what interpersonal communication is. Remember those 3 key words that I gave you there. happen simultaneously, also the mutual influence that happens in interpersonal communication, and also that it helps to manage relationships. What motivates us to initiate relationships. We also talked about how to maintain our relationships. And then finally, we talked about the role that self-disclosure plays. Specifically, we talked about those two models, social penetration theory and the Johari window. So I hope this video has been helpful for learning more about Chapter 7.